Welcome back. Well, it's dangerous to criticize George Soros, one of the world's richest men. He has a thin skin, but that's not why he's dangerous. A lot of billionaires have thin skins. It's that George Soros is so pathologically political, and he is an extremist in terms of how far he will go to change the world and bend it to his own vision. He's been accused by those who work with him of having a God complex, and you can understand it when you're quite that rich. You've canceled, you've met every challenge in life other than people will not bend their will to you. There's nothing in commerce or industry or banking or finance he hasn't done. So now he just wants to settle scores and change the world to be in his image. George Soros is by far the largest donor in American politics, perhaps as large as all other donors combined. Let me show you right now one of his websites. This is the Open Society Foundation. They openly boast that they have spent $16.8 billion US dollars, billion, that's 20 billion Canadian, on political projects. That surely is as much as every other donor combined. Now, this is parceled out around the world, 50,000 grants worth, and there's a map on his homepage that shows where he does things in the world. Sometimes they're called color revolutions, where he tries to topple entire governments. Sometimes he actually succeeds. I say you have to be careful because I myself wrote a column about George Soros in the Toronto Sun about a decade ago. It was meticulously researched and footnoted, reviewed by the Sun, but Soros slapped the Toronto Sun with a defamation notice for things that would be publishable in America, but we don't have the First Amendment up here. And the Sun looked at this multi-billionaire and settled immediately. I regret that, but I didn't have the fighting spirit then that I have now. So it is with some, I'm impressed and amazement that someone dares to write an unauthorized biography of Soros. And we join that author now. His name is Matt Palumbo, who comes to us live via Skype from the New York area. The book is called Man Behind the Curtain, Inside the Secret Network of George Soros. And Matt Palumbo joins us now. Matt, great to meet you. Good for you.
Thanks for having me on.
I tell our people, don't engage in conspiracy theories. There's no need for it. The world is crazy enough as it is. And especially in the case of George Soros, he admits to everything. He's got a monstrous ego. I showed you his homepage. There's a whole section dedicated to him. He's not hiding how much money he's spending. He sort of likes to take credit for most things. That's what's so amazing about George Soros. It's not a conspiracy theory. There are facts that he brags about that, I don't know if you call them a conspiracy, but they're certainly shocking.
Yeah, it's almost like conspiracy facts. One of the, I think, most surprising things about researching for the book, which, included reading everything Soros has ever written, was he is very open and transparent about his ego. In fact, the intro quote to the book is Soros saying, I want to be the conscience of the world. That's my goal. And all throughout, the first chapter is sort of just biographical, giving an overview of his life. And he's very open about his ego. He's very open that, even his early activism, which was, toppling communist governments, even right-wingers might look at that and say, well, at least he did something right there. But even then he admits, well, it was mostly self-serving. When state assets are getting privatized, he was able to profit from that. Even the subtitle of my book is The Secret Network of George Soros. And it's secret in that, no one has put together the kind of pieces of the puzzle or done the legwork. But a lot of it's just really out there. It's, we can look up his grants. We can look up where the money's going. He himself is very transparent about the goals. So it made the job a lot easier. And, when it comes to conspiracies, that was part of the motivation for the book was, whenever there's some new leftist cause or movement, you always see someone in the comments blaming Soros, even when he's not behind it. So I just thought, well, why not just document everywhere he actually is so that, there's no needs for conspiracies when the guy has spent, as you put up there, 16 billion US dollars. And that's really just the start of it. Another theme of the book, too, is what happens after he's gone. And in just the past few years, I think it was about 5 years ago, he donated over $30 billion of his wealth to his own foundation, which is roughly twice as much as has been spent throughout his entire lifetime on these causes. So, 1/3 of his wealth has been depleted towards these sort of causes, but there's a heck of a lot left to go, and a lot of it will actually be probably beyond the grave.
Yeah, and his son, Alex Soros, is clearly trying to pick up in his father's baton. George Soros, his son, Alex, as you might imagine, is a playboy in so many ways, fast women, fast cars, living the billionaire lifestyle. But as he approaches middle age, he's becoming a political gadfly. I mean, he loves traveling the world by private jet and photographing himself with leftist politicians around the world. So he clearly is trying to transform his father's network into his own. I don't know if he has the brains or the killer instinct of his father, but he certainly has his father's ambition and his father's love for power. Do you deal with his son in the book as well?
Well, I don't like go into that much detail, but I do kind of list him as one of the people that's going to kind of continue the throne. Now, Soros initially, I think it was maybe a decade or two ago, thought that if he tried to sort of, influence him from beyond the grave, it would be difficult because obviously he has no control. Though later in, his even later years, he's sort of reversed on that and decided it would be worth doing. And one of the things he's done too, in addition to, donating these $30 billion, is he's also targeting universities, and I call it kind of like, the infrastructure of society or the infrastructure of ideas. He's just piling money into things that will sort of advance his ideological vision where he doesn't even have to look at it or talk to it or touch it. So he created a network of colleges called the Open Society Foundation University Network. There's a couple dozen colleges all around the world that are all partnered with one another, and all they do is just teach and advance his agenda and do a ton of research to try to support causes he supports. And of course 100% of the research is going to find a way to support what he wants, all the time.
Yeah. There's a real problem amongst conservative or freedom-oriented philanthropists. I mean, I don't know if I would call John D. Rockefeller conservative. I think he was a robber baron, but I certainly wouldn't call him leftist, progressive, or anything like that. These ultra-wealthy barons of the right, when they leave their money to foundations, like the Rockefeller Brothers Fund or the Ford Foundation, if those men could see what their money is being deployed to today, they would spin in their graves. They would have preferred to have set their money in a big pile and burned it. I don't think George Soros has the same problem because, it was John Conquest who said any organization that's not explicitly conservative over time will wind up leftist. Well, Soros is starting leftist, and I think the risk that his money will be turned around against his donors' intent is zero. Like, I mean, if you're donating it to an American university, that's the wokest of the woke. I think he will be able to rest in his grave soundly, knowing that his money will continue to do leftist bidding for decades after he's gone, probably a century.
That's what confused me about the college thing was I'm going, what? Like, is his thesis that college isn't liberal enough? I mean, obviously that would be laughable to say. I could only find, too, to your point, one example of his donations backfiring. This is back in the late 80s. He actually funded Viktor Orban's law school scholarship. Now, Orban had just founded his current political party, Fidesz. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. And he was more center-left at the time, and he got the sponsorship. Of course, later in life, we know is now a right-wing nationalist, has effectively expelled Soros from the country, and even Soros's university, Central European University, has been expelled. So that was one example I found of it hilariously blowing up in his face. But yeah, the other 50,000 grants, of course, has not nothing like that has happened again.
We're talking to Matt Palumbo, who's the author of a new book called Man Behind the Curtain, Inside the Secret Network of George Soros. Again, that word secret, I understand what you're saying. It's not secret. It's all out there. Even I know. For example, I read years ago about Soros's various projects. He had an Attorneys General project. He had a Secretaries of State project. I'm thinking, what are you talking about? Well, he wanted to put in Attorneys General across America and Secretaries of State, which is not a word we use up here in Canada, but at the U.S. state level, that's basically the folks in charge of the votes, how you vote. So if you're, am I right on that, Matt? So if you're...
Yeah, I actually have a whole chapter called Soros Goes Local, and I'll elaborate in a bit, yeah.
So if you're trying to move elections, if you're trying to change criminal law policy, yeah, you can do it at the huge high level. But if you install radical left-wing prosecutors to basically say we're not going to prosecute crimes anymore, if you install radical vote counters who say we don't want any voter ID, you can have mail-in ballots, ballot harvesting, you spend 10 years putting in 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 of these people at local level, guess what? it all comes together on a key election night. Or, you know, you look at San Francisco and the rest of California, in any big left-wing city, you can see the Soros candidates. He is, like I say, he is larger than either the Republicans or the Democrats in terms of his spend. Like a U.S. presidential election is in the single-digit billions. Soros 10 times that already. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, so actually, I think it's probably the longest chapter of the book is called Soros Goes Local. And I think it's obviously the most relevant to an American readers. And I just go through almost like a baseball card for each candidate he's backed. I go through who's the person, how much has Soros given, what's their background. They're almost always unqualified or very little prosecutorial experience. What policies do they advocate on the campaign? Then what policies do they then implement, and what resulted? And it's the same story every time. They always campaign on weak on crime policies, and they put it in social justice-y language, or make it like, we just don't want to send people to jail who smoke pot. They phrase it in that language, and of course that's not what actually happens. It's across the board will also get enforced, and usually there's double-digit increases in violent crime. The only forms of crime that ever decrease are the things they just stop defining as crime. So it's rigged. And a lot of these, I think his success rate I found was in excess of 90% in the local races, because, you can't do this really much in national races, but in local, you really can just drown someone in cash and pretty much make it inevitable that they win. And a lot of these prosecutors have become household names, like Kim Foxx, the one who got Jesse Smollett, the former actor, off, was a Soros-backed prosecutor. In San Francisco, you mentioned Chase Abudin, the son of two 60s radicals who was raised by Bill Ayers. And one of his main policies, he effectively legalized shoplifting in San Francisco, because in California it's just a misdemeanor if you steal less than $900 worth of something, which is actually common in many states. But the difference is he's just not prosecuting misdemeanors of that sort, so it basically makes it legal. And every few days there's a new viral video in San Francisco of someone robbing like a Walgreens or a Target, and then they literally will sell the goods 2 blocks down the corner because there's no consequences. And then of course, we kind of know this in New York and the Giuliani cleanup, that when you enable crimes like that, you bring a certain type of people into an area, and that is going to bubble up, and it's going to turn into much, much more violent crime. And all politics ultimately is local. Most governments are federalist, and that's where the most autonomy and control is. So it's I think that's what people need to be most aware of. Like even if Soros single-handedly got Biden elected, he still has a million other people to answer for. When it's someone local and he's gotten them elected, his grip on them is just so much more intense. Not like he is in the Biden administration. In fact, I have a whole chapter on that as well. The law and order, I think, is the most dangerous. The local, I should say.
We're in a very important Canadian election, and I want everyone to see our premium shows that are normally behind a paywall. So during the election, anyone can get free access to our special premium shows, my nightly show, a weekly show by Sheila Gunn Reid and David Menzies and Andrew Chapados, by going to rebelnewsplus.com and using the promo code ELECTION, and you'll see the good stuff for free. Go to rebelnewsplus.com and use promo code ELECTION.